Imagine being sentenced to a punishment that's worse than death. A punishment where you're still alive, still breathing, but to everyone you've ever known, you're a ghost. In Viking Iceland, the ultimate verdict wasn't the executioner's axe. It was a single word from the Althing assembly that erased you from society, making it legal for anyone to kill you. This was the terrifying reality of outlawry, a judgment that turned you from a person into a rumor, a forest man, a living dead. To understand this unique and brutal form of justice, you first have to get your head around the world that created it. Picture Viking Age, Iceland, around the 10th century. It's a vast volcanic island, settled by Norsemen. Many were reacting to the growing power of kings in Norway, but they were also driven by land hunger and old-fashioned family feuds. They were fiercely independent, proud, and deeply concerned with honor. But this new society had a problem. With no king, no standing army, and no police force, how do you stop society from collapsing into an endless cycle of blood feuds? When a man is murdered, his family is honor-bound to seek vengeance. But that vengeance just creates another grieving family, also honor-bound to retaliate. Without a central authority to step in, this cycle could tear communities apart. The Vikings get stereotyped as lawless barbarians, but the opposite was often true. They craved order. They knew that for their fragile new society to survive, they needed a way to handle disputes, from land ownership to murder, without a monarch's decree. What they came up with was one of the most remarkable political creations of the medieval world, the Althing. Established around 930 AD at a dramatic windswept site called Thingvellir, the Althing was a national assembly where free men from all over Iceland would gather each year. It wasn't a parliament in a grand building. It was an open-air forum, a meeting of minds under the wide Icelandic sky. Here, laws were made, disputes were heard, and justice was dispensed. The Althing was the heart of the Icelandic Commonwealth, a unique attempt to replace the rule of a king with the rule of law. The Althing wasn't just a chaotic free-for-all. It was a sophisticated legal system. At its center was the Logretta, or Law Council, made up of powerful chieftains called Godar. These chieftains weren't feudal lords. Their power came from the respect and loyalty of the free farmers who chose to follow them. And guiding the whole assembly was one of the most crucial figures in Icelandic society, the law speaker, or lögsogumadur. In an age before widespread literacy, the law speaker was a living library. Tradition holds he had to memorize the entire body of Icelandic law, reciting a third of it from memory at the Althing each year to ensure the laws were known to all. When a new or tricky legal point arose, he was the one the chieftains would consult. When a case was brought, say, a dispute over inheritance or an accusation of theft, it was a public affair. Witnesses gave testimony, oaths were sworn, and panels of judges would deliver a verdict. But here's the crucial part. The Althing had no police to enforce its rulings. If a man was found guilty and ordered to pay a fine, what stopped him from just refusing? The whole system relied on social pressure and the collective will of the community to see justice done. For most crimes, the solution was compensation. If you injured someone, you paid a set amount. If you killed someone, your family was expected to pay man money to the victim's family to prevent a blood feud. This system was designed to restore balance and honor, to mend the tear in the social fabric. But what happens when a crime is so heinous, so dishonorable, that no amount of silver can fix it? What happens when a man commits a foul murder or betrays his community so profoundly that his very presence is a stain on society? For these crimes, the Althing had a punishment far more chilling than a simple fine. For these men, the verdict was outlawry. The Old Norse term for full outlawry was skogangur, which literally means forest-going. A man declared a full outlaw became a skogarmadur, a forest man. But this was more than just exile. It was a complete and total erasure from society. It was, in the words of one scholar, a social death. From the moment the judgment was passed at the Althing, the outlaw ceased to exist as a legal person. He lost everything. His property was confiscated and divided among his victims and the community. His family was severed from him. Giving an outlaw food, shelter, or other aid was itself a serious crime. He was stripped of all rights and all legal protection. This meant that anyone at any time could kill him without penalty. In fact, killing a known outlaw was a way to get rid of a social menace. There were two main forms of this punishment. The lesser form of outlawry, Fjorbaugssgarder, was a temporary banishment, typically for 3 years. A famous example is Eric the Red. After being outlawed from Iceland for manslaughter, he used his exile to explore a vast, icy land to the west. He gave it a clever name, Greenland, hoping, as the sagas say, that men will desire much the more to go there if the land has a good name. He returned to Iceland, his sentence served, and recruited settlers for his new discovery. For Eric the Red, outlawry was a catalyst for fame and fortune. But for most, the sentence wasn't a temporary setback. It was full outlawry. And that was a life sentence. A death sentence in slow motion. The outlaw had a short grace period to flee his home and disappear into the wilderness, into the forest, before he was fair game. After that, he was prey. Imagine the reality of that life. You are now a vargur, a wolf, a creature of the wild. You can't use the main roads. You can't seek shelter in a town. You are hunted not just by the family of your victims seeking righteous revenge, but by anyone who fancies the price on your head, or simply wants to rid the world of your presence. You are a ghost, haunting the edges of the society that cast you out. The Icelandic sagas are filled with the grim tales of these men. Take the story of Gisli Sursson. After avenging the murder of his sworn brother, a complex web of family honor and betrayal led to him being declared an outlaw. For 13 long years, Gisli lived on the run, hiding in caves and remote valleys, constantly plagued by nightmares and the fear of discovery. His loyal wife, Aud, refused to reveal his location, but the net was always closing. In the end, he was cornered and, after a heroic final stand, cut down. Or consider Grettir the Strong, perhaps Iceland's most famous outlaw. Sentenced for a death he may have caused accidentally, Grettir spent nearly 20 years as a skoggermadur. He was a man of incredible strength who fought trolls and monsters, yet he was betrayed by other outlaws and feared by the very farmers he sometimes protected. His life was one of profound loneliness and paranoia. This created a world of total mistrust. You couldn't even trust your fellow damned because there was no honor among the rightless and no legal consequence for killing another outlaw. This was the genius and the horror of outlawry as a form of social control. In a society without prisons or police, it weaponized the community itself. It turned every free man into a potential executioner and every neighbor's door into a locked gate. It didn't just punish the criminal, it made an example of him, a terrifying bedtime story told to keep others in line. To be an outlaw was to be utterly alone. A man without a tribe, without honor, without a name. It was to be erased. And if you're a fan of the deep, dark, and often misunderstood corners of history, you've come to the right place. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell for more stories that the history books were too afraid to tell you.